Thank you very much, Mark, for inviting me. It's the first time I'm here. I'm very impressed by the campus and all the work that you have been doing. I really like the idea that an Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, we speak about globalization, we'll speak about growth, we speak about democracy, this important conversation, we speak about values, we speak about living together, and we speak about multilateralism. I think all these issues are coming into the forefront today, where we live in a world so much globalized, interconnected, and at the same time so fragmented. And it might seem as a paradox that in an era where we are 24 hours connected with what happens on the other side of the world, at the same time we don't have the same feeling towards sometimes our neighbor, and we still need to learn of who our neighbor is. Speaking about the challenges of globalization, of course, I would come to the idea of the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, who 2 years ago presented his book about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and now it is very much debated with the advancement of new technologies, of artificial intelligence, and of what it brings to societies. So on one side we have enormous opportunities, and here I think I would like to say that I myself was surprised when I heard these very interesting findings of the Stockholm Institute of Strategic Studies, when it said that in terms of conflict we have less conflict in the world in the history of humanity. In terms of being educated, we are the most educated ever humanity in this world. So in many of these issues, we have advanced enormously. But still we have the sense, the feeling of uncertainty, the fear, and the fear is all in different communities, in different parts. And we see that these fears and these, I would say, lack of opportunities for some people because of the huge inequalities, which unfortunately are increasing in the world, creates this sense of uncertainty. And then the rust belts, as we call them, vote in the way that we nowadays see dangerous, because they vote for populist parties, for the extremist parties, who try to give simple answers to complex issues, because I think this is what populism is all about. Simple answers to complex issues. And this is where I believe the role of multilateralism, the role of the United Nations, and you will of course excuse me for being partial. 8 years I have been as Director General of UNESCO, and I have participated in all of these important debates and meetings, and thank you very much, Mr. President, Plevnilev, my President, for saying such kind words towards me. Multilateralism is under pressure, and I would say that not just under pressure, but we have seen in many of the occasions it has been bypassed by different coalitions, by different countries taking either bilateral approach or other approach towards solving these issues. But we know that there is no other framework in the world today when we have common challenges which do not know borders, physical borders, being climate change, loss of biodiversity, nowadays refugees, migrations, economic development, trade, that we just are bound, we are condemned to work together. There is no other way than sitting on the table and discussing these issues. Even the most complex and the most threatening issues at the end of the day have to be solved on the table in the 21st century. And I say in the 21st century because sometimes looking at developments, I'm asking myself whether we are on the 21st century or somewhere in the 15th, 16th century, when we see the revival of all the attempts to revive old empires with all the I would say, different kind of ambitions that translate into some concrete policy decisions. And in these turbulent times, in these times of constant change, I think we still have to have some important guidelines, and what President Plevnilev just said, a plan. do we have a plan and how to react? And I think we have a plan. And in terms of the soft power of the United Nations, because I think United Nations, of course, we have the Security Council, is about the hard power. It's about taking decisions in security and peace. But nowadays, peace is also meant to be achieved by the soft power, because you may go somewhere and introduce troops. And we see in the Sahara, sub-Saharan Africa, we see in the Sahel, with the fight against extremism that took over Mali, and then they destroyed the mausoleums and monuments, and they occupied a big part of it, and they still, unfortunately, are around Lake Chad, and we know Boko Haram is over there. But we know that only military measures are not sufficient nowadays in order to solve these problems on the long-term basis. And we need, as we say, the soft power of the United Nations, or the smart power. I say soft power, repeating what Joseph Nye, the dean of the Kennedy School of Government, said a long time ago in Harvard University, or the smart power, because unless we have educated people, unless we have sustainable development, we have growth, we have inclusiveness, social inclusiveness, we will not achieve this situation in the world. And if you look globally, and of course, I was very interested in listening both to the Luxembourg, of course, example, the Swiss example, which is also fascinating in terms of how to achieve inclusiveness in society and based on a democratic model. We still have to know that in the world nowadays we have 4 billion people that do not have access to internet. 4 billion people. This is 60% almost of world population of humanity do not have access to internet, do not hold in their hands iPhones. We have 2.5 billion people who do not have access to drinking water and sanitation. And we know that all these divides, the inequalities, if we do not take urgent measures, will increase, because those who have all this access will move very fastly ahead, and we see this happening, and those who do not have will continue to lag behind. And in a globalized world, we are all concerned, because we cannot close the borders. You may build a wall, try to build a wall, but you may stop, for a certain, but we are living really in a globalized world. And then climate change do not know that this is the physical border of one country and the another. If there is a tsunami, it will hit you. If there is the rising water, it will hit you also. Or the drought that we see in many parts of the world, or inundations, or this vacillation of the temperatures. So we need really to look at this global picture of these growing inequalities in order to find the right answers. I was yesterday in the London Business School, where there was an important debate about gender equality and women's empowerment, talking about women in economy, women in politics, women in education, and all the other issues. And what is very interesting, I was one of the keynote speakers, and we also mentioned another important World Economic Forum report that was published in 2017, which was saying that with the pace of the current development, gender equality and empowerment will be reached in 217 years. 217 years, 2 centuries. And we think that, we are moving very fast into that. We know that if we go with the same pace of progress in education, where we know that there are still 800 million illiterate people in the world, and unfortunately, this is not decreasing, this number. Of course, demographics plays a hugely important role there. 2/3 are women, and we know that there are almost 60 million people who are not in school, but with the pace that we are going and solving these issues, the girls from the poorest communities in sub-Saharan Africa will get into primary education in 2074. And we do not know maybe sufficiently that only 60% of the countries have achieved parity between boys and girls in schools in primary level, and only 38 in the secondary level. So all these figures are staggering. And in Europe, because we also speak a lot about Europe, there was an interesting report which was commissioned about literacy in Europe, commissioned by the European Commission and led by Princess Laurentien from the Netherlands, whom I know very well. She's a special envoy of UNESCO for literacy, found out that illiteracy in Europe is growing. And I'm speaking about Europe, and I'm not speaking only about refugees or migrants. So I think my point is that we really have to go very deep into analyzing and knowing what is happening in this global stage in order to find the right answers. But speaking about the Sustainable Development Goals, because I really believe that we have to take very seriously this enormous effort of the United Nations and to look at the sustainability of all the development efforts. Now, we have a plan. Of course, there are many arguments whether this is too ambitious, whether it is realistic to achieve it by 2030. And to be frank, I personally think that this is not the main, should not be the main part of the debate. The main part of the debate is how to implement it and how to put it into national policies so that governments, because it's so comprehensive, it is so deeply rooted into the ownership of the governments. It is unlike the Millennium Development Goals, which was kind of imposed on governments. Now, it is a plan that has been elaborated by a very long process of consultations with the civil society, with the businesses, with the governments, academia. So we have this plan. And I would like, from that point of view, to concentrate on two aspects. First is about education, and I know that yesterday Gordon Brown has spoken about it as a special envoy of the Secretary General for Education. We have worked very, very closely with Gordon Brown because UNESCO is the lead agency for education. And the second, I would like to touch upon culture and development, culture and peace, culture and conflict, and why heritage matters in this so diverse world. Now, a few words about education. If you look back into history, I mean, for this audience, maybe we think that it is so natural that education should be part of a development and system. We all believe that education is the foundation of human development. But we tend to forget that it has not always been like that. Even in the first report of the former Prime Minister of Norway, Gro Harlem Brundtland, in those years about sustainable development, it was focused, of course, on environment because this was the first kind of alert system that we have to look at in environment and what brings sustainability, also climate change. But there was hardly ever a talk about education. And it came only later that education was recognized that a driver of development and of equality and of a social inclusion and of a social mobility, because it was kind of accepted that there will be segments of society circle that will not have access to education, that education should not be invested so much in it. It was the business of usual type of thinking around education. And I think in the 90s and further on with the Millennium Development Goals and now very strongly with the goal number 4 in the Sustainable Development Goals, we have a comprehensive view of what education brings to a society. And when I have comprehensive view, we have to know that some education systems were built only around the idea that an education produces workers for the manufacturing, for the economy. And now we have really a very broad understanding about education. And we at UNESCO are trying to look at it indeed from a very different perspective. It is about education and social inclusiveness, of course, education about giving the empowerment of people, but education also as a driver of comprehensive development, education for sustainable development, education for climate change, education for human rights, cultural literacy, competencies in education while we live in a very diverse world. And we try to launch new concept, education in new technologies and education, of course, for the new economy, rising economy. But we tried also to launch a totally new concept, which is very much linked, I think, with the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy. This is about education for global citizenship. a concept that embraces all these different aspects of a quality education, a value of education, what kind of citizens we want to see in this world, which is full of opportunity but also of challenges. And I think it is very important because this is the bridge between education, between culture, between growing economy, inclusiveness, climate change. And we always emphasize, and I'm a deep believer into this, that unless when we look at the new sources of dynamism, every country, every economy is looking for new sources of dynamism. And we speak a lot about renewable energies. And I have always thought that the best renewable energy in the world is human talent. Because we have seen countries which do not have natural resources, like Japan or Korea, have grown to be the leaders in innovation and driving forces nowadays in the world, not because they have a lot of natural resources, but because they have invested in the human beings. And I think we have to come back to this. If these countries have done it, others can do it as well, even the countries that are lagging behind. So investing in education, in quality education, not just any education, because I have to tell you that with the poor quality of education, we have 250 million young people in this world who have statistics do not consider them to be literate because they have gone through formal education in their own countries, but because of the poor quality, they're functionally illiterate. So you pour money somewhere, but you don't get the results. So all these, I would say, complexities have made us put such a strong emphasis on education, which has been largely neglected, and you will be surprised that it has been neglected. Because for us it's obvious, but when you go and speak to some of the political leaders or others, or even some of the big foundations who invest in development, and you say education, they say, yes, but it is very complex. Yes, it is complex, but it is the sustainability of all the other sustainable development goals. And it is the link between education and health, between education and gender equality, between education and climate. And I can tell you that I went to Afghanistan 2 years ago. I've been several times in Afghanistan. UNESCO has a big literacy program, and I met some of the women. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to a village because it was security reasons, and I said, let's bring some of these young women to our office in Kabul, and they came with their kids. And I started talking to them, and I asked the first one, why do you think, what literacy brought to you? What new you learned? And she said, I learned about hygiene. She never was thinking about these issues. And now she said, I know how to raise my children. I learned about hygiene. The second said, I learned about environment. And she said, I'm now passionate about environment. I'm passionate about biodiversity and climate change. And the third, she said, now I go to the market. Nobody can cheat me. I can make better deals when I go to the market because I know now how to do things. These are simple things, but they were so important for these women in a small village next to Kabul. And now going to the other topic, because I think we are lagging behind schedule. Initially I thought of speaking more about culture and heritage issues that I know that the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy is so much invested in. During the preparation of all the work for the Sustainable Development Agenda, and this is something that is very dear to my heart, I have made a huge advocacy, and of course UNESCO, the organization that I was leading, to put culture within the thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals and about sustainability in general terms. And I never meant, and I don't say it, that we should put it as a kind of a objective, because this is not a name, this is not an objective, this is not a goal. Because during this process of elaborating the SDGs, the agenda, there were two issues. The first is what we want to achieve, and these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The second was how we achieve it. And I think in the second, without culture, without a broad consideration of culture, and I'm not speaking, when I say culture, I want immediately to say, I'm not speaking about arts. I'm not speaking about arts for the elites or something. It is also there. Creativity is there. But it's in a broader sense of culture and sustainable development. Because I know that without the cultural approaches to so many of these issues, we can never have a social inclusion in a society. We can never mobilize communities and people around achieving some goal, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. Without having a cultural literacy about the others, we will never live together, something that is coming so much to the forefront of what is happening nowadays in the world. And I think that the advance of, unfortunately, and tragic of violent extremism and all the destruction of heritage in so many parts of the world. Of course, Mali, which is very dear to my heart, because there I went, this was probably one of the first large-scale destructions after the Bamiyan Buddhas were destroyed in the beginning of the year 2000, and I went with the French president just 1 week maybe after extremists were pushed away from Timbuktu, and we saw the destroyed mausoleums and the manuscripts they started burning them. Unfortunately, they burned something like 4,000, but there are many more manuscripts that were saved in a very clandestine manner. It's another story. Maybe one day it can be said also. But I saw the importance for the local people of the preservation of this heritage. And this was the place where I promised to rebuild. So 3 years ago, we rebuilt the mausoleums with the local masons, with the local traditional methods, and I went back to open it again. And this was probably one of the most moving experiences I had as a Director General of UNESCO, because not only they gave me the honorary citizen of Timbuktu, and you can imagine a Director General of UNESCO has many honorary titles, Doctor Honoris Causa, state awards, citizens, but I think this was probably some of the most dear to my hearts, because I had the feeling that I'm giving back the identity of these people. And this is so powerful, I think was so powerful example of why culture and heritage matters if you want to reconcile, if you want to move forward, if you want to fight these violent extreme ideologies, extremism, if you want to achieve peace, and if you want to rebuild the lives of communities and of the countries. And I can give many more examples around this. The other side of heritage protection, and of course we can speak a lot about why it matters for Syria, for Iraq, what happened in these countries with the destruction of heritage. But the other side of it, I think, is equally important. It is that culture, creativity, creative industries, as we call them nowadays, create jobs. This is a very dynamic sector of the economy of many countries. Here, tourism also falls. I know that now there is the Berlin Big Fair, tourist fair, and we know that more than 40% of all tourism in the world is cultural tourism. We know that this is also about visiting UNESCO heritage sites or other sites. It is about big festivals, cultural festivals. It is about a network that UNESCO launched, the Creative Cities Network that we launched, which nowadays embraces more than 150 cities in the world around the idea of creative city of design, creative city of literature, creative city of film industry, and so on and so forth, of gastronomy. And when I was entering here and I saw this photo here with President Grimson of Iceland, I remember when he came first to visit UNESCO and we had a talk. It was, I think, in 2013, Iceland, the first country that fell into turmoil with a very severe financial and economic crisis. You remember what the situation was there. And one of the first countries also to start moving and to overcome this economic crisis. And I said, Mr. President, how did you do it? I'm very interested to listen to you. How did you overcome this crisis? And he said, you may be surprised, but you will be pleased, very pleased to hear what I will tell you. We continued building our big convention and cultural house, the Harpa. Those of you who have been in Reykjavik, maybe you know the big Reykjavik is a city very comfortable, very nice city with the small houses, wooden houses, not high-rise. And the Harper, the big Harper, also house, the cultural hub, the cultural house, he said, we started building it, and it was just in the midst of the crisis, a huge investment. He mentioned figures I don't remember. And he said, one of my first decisions was, we have to continue building it. There was a fierce debate. Where do we find the money? Why do we need this? Do we really need it? We have to focus on other things. And he said, I firmly believed that unless we do this, first we will create a space for exchange, for cultural, scientific, tourism conventions. We will also show more culture involved and give resilience to our people so that they have a much more confidence, optimism for the future. And he said, this is exactly what is happening now. And when I went to Reykjavik and I saw it, and now they have festivals that attract tourists from Europe. They are going especially there. They have opera festivals, they have theater festivals, they have conventions. And he said, this helps us rebuild our sense also of economy, of national identity. This helped us boost the economy in the country. And he said, we made the right choice. We invested in culture. Just a few years ago, we prepared also with PricewaterhouseCoopers a report on how much culture industries create jobs. So this was an interesting report because it showed that 29 million jobs in the world it was a few years ago, I think now they are moving because cultural industries are developing very fast nowadays, and it is more than the automobile industry globally. More than the automobile industry globally. And this is one of the fastest economies in many parts of the world that are growing. And why they are important? They are local jobs. They cannot be exported. It is not something that a company comes and moves this manufacturing, this factory to another country. And it is very important. There are local jobs that are very often linked with their green jobs. Most of them nowadays become green jobs, so very much embedded into our strive for protecting biodiversity and climate change. In many of these cases, I would say in Europe increasingly, they employ women. This is particularly the case in the UK. There are jobs also that are very much linked with very, very closely linked with the national heritage, and this is the case of the tourist industry, because with the World Tourist Organization, we have launched several joint projects on sustainable tourism. And just last December, there was a big conference in Oman, UNESCO WTO conference in Oman, that adopted the framework for sustainable tourism in the world. And also, because this is important, this is the intercultural dialogue. Tourists are, I would say, the best messengers of this intercultural dialogue. And when you combine it with the knowledge of the heritage and the work that we have been doing, because the World Heritage sites, which are nowadays 1,073, I guess recently, this is actually the open book of the world history of diversity. And when you combine it also with the knowledge about the others and with the tourist industry, this is about the intercultural dialogue. What best way of learning about the others than going and visiting a temple, something that belongs to another religion, and you admire with the same, I would say, enthusiasm and emotion, another religion or another culture, because it belongs to the whole humanity. And the overall idea of the World Heritage Convention is quite extraordinary, because the underlying reason and I would say criteria for inscribing a site on the World Heritage List is outstanding universal value. I think it's a great idea that still needs to be promoted, particularly nowadays when we live in these very turbulent times. So my point, and with this I would stop here, is that culture, heritage, development, it has such a multidimensional aspects. You cannot even achieve peace and security without putting an emphasis and caring about protecting of heritage and diversity. And this has been recognized last year for the first time, and I'm very proud because we have made an enormous advocacy around the world and with the Security Council. There was for the first time adopted a resolution 2347, the only such resolution which is in its totality dedicated to the protection of heritage, fighting illicit trafficking, looting of antiquities, and its role with peace, security, and humanitarian aspects. And I think it's a breakthrough for the thinking in the United Nations and the multilateral system of why culture matters and why it is important nowadays for peace, security, but also for the sustainable development. And of course, around this, I believe, and I'm sure that the Institute of Cultural Diplomacy is working a lot in order to pass this very strong message in its work, because without having this sensitivity, without having this knowledge, without enlarging our understanding about peace and sustainable development and including into it the cultural, so to say, concerns, I don't think we will find the right answers neither to the issue of living together, nor to the issue of how to achieve growth and inclusion in a sustainable manner. Because I think we may achieve a lot of progress, but not sustainable. And the key word here in the Agenda 2030 is not just, we do something in health, in education, we protect the environment, but we have to do it in a sustainable manner. And this is where culture plays a critically important role. So this was my message. Changed a little bit because I think it's a very interesting debate that we have this morning. Thank you.
Let me thank you to the former Director General of UNESCO for a very interesting idea. I like this idea of the cultural products. You cannot put tariff on them. That's very good about. We economists used to say that economy whole itself is a culture now. It's getting culture with the artificial intelligence. It's another thing. Before that was a difference between cultural life and economic life. They're getting to combine. Okay, thank you for that. Any questions, please? Please, sir. Yeah. Next.
This is Dr. Abdul Majid from Bangladesh. First of all, I would like to express our sincere thanks and gratitude to the former DG Cultural UNESCO for helping our country in many ways. Only one point, it is also a comment, that you know that we have a Sundarbans, a natural reserve and resource, but the business people, the industrialist people, for the development of, they are constructing a power plant just nearby their Sundarbans. Here, the economic development or the arts of economic development coming up by destroying a natural resource or something. So how do you think or look at it of this type of contradictory elements in this? Once we are saying that the natural resources should be reserved because it is very important for the development of mankind, everything, but at the same time, their business motives or in the name of economic development, the coal power plant is being established or constructed by our neighboring country and our government and etc. And all the social movement people, they are protesting it. Even we have applied to the UNESCO and other organizations just to give a support to this movement, that natural resources should not be, or the reserve should not be destroyed in the name of development.
Well, I think I'm happy to see somebody from Bangladesh. I have visited several times, I think 3 times, and I know very well the Prime Minister, and it's a country that is growing, moving, with a lot of challenges, many climate change, of course, we know the story, and I have a lot of sympathy for the efforts of your government and the Prime Minister. I think it's really a question not just for Bangladesh, it's a question for very many developing countries, and this was the basis of the this was at the basis of the Paris Climate Agreement. There were many countries. The argument was that, you want to stop our development. You developed countries have already passed through this phase. Now you're developed and you want to stop our development. And definitely there was countries like India and others who gave their agreement one of the last to the Paris Climate Agreement. Now, and we see also now with the new President Plevneliev spoke also about the new trends into the American administration policy for that matter, but not only in countries. I think the answer to this is that investing in renewable energies is the best business for the future. And I think countries like California knows this, because California goes its own way now, right? In terms of climate change, and some other states also, because they decided to follow their own strategic policies. Countries like China are starting to understand this also, that if you want to move into the future, of course you may have imminent gains, invest in coal and others, but if you want on a long-term basis to develop technologies, and this is the renewables and another business. So I think for businesses, there are different arguments. One, of course, are moral, and there are companies who have been participating in the climate agreement. I can give the name of somebody whom I really appreciate a lot and respect, Paul Pullman, the CEO of Unilever, who is an SDG advocate and who has put such an emphasis on climate and environmental protection. So there are those companies, but these are the moral aspects of it, because they're also citizens of the planet. All these CEOs and others, shareholders, right? But at the same time, another argument for the business people is good. It's just a good business. And if we invest now, and China understands this, just to give one example, because I was 2 weeks ago in China and I listened a lot. If we invest in renewables, in new energies, it's a good business for the future. In any case, we are moving towards this. So you have to use all different kinds of arguments.
Thank you. Thank you. Gentlemen, you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm Dr. Ibrahim from Iraq. I'm the Secretary General for the IEZ party in Iraq. You know that Iraq have a very important civilization. A tourist and cultural country. But now we have a new situation. There is a terrorist, not terrorism. Therefore, and I think we must fight the thought by thought. Therefore, now, especially at this time, we need a new paradigm for the UNESCO and UNICEF and all the organizations, for UN organization and another institute or university. We can make a change in Iraq for institute like this institute for Mark II for cultural diplomacy, because we need it so much to return back to the a right situation. We are a people like the art, like the culture. Before a few years, all of us, we go to the cinema, we go to the theater. Now, all this was don't find in Iraq and in Baghdad especially. We don't find any culture like cinema or art or music. Therefore, we need especially work from UNICEF and UNESCO.
I can only agree with you, because I've been in Iraq twice. I went just a few months after extremists destroyed Mosul, the museum and the story. In 2014, I went to Baghdad, I went to Erbil, and I visited the Baharka camp, refugee camp. I met with minorities, and I went to the museum, of course, of Baghdad. It was not open then it was opened a few months later. And I went at that time to visit and to speak with the Prime Minister Abadi. And I remember now, you remind me that I said to Mr. President, what can we do? Because UNESCO has been so much involved in Iraq in protection of heritage. And what can we do now? These people that are, advancing in extremists, probably better. What can we do also to support you? And UNESCO has been very much involved in technical vocational training, universities, of course, apart from culture. And his answer was a bit surprising for me. He said, you know what you can do? You help us also reintroduce and look at the curricula in our schools, and this is what exactly we started doing last year of helping Ministry of Education review the curricula. He said, young Iraqis maybe have lost this sense of diversity, and we have, with all these turbulent times, we have forgotten that we are one of the most diverse countries in the world. There were Christians and Yazidis and Jews and Shebaks and Turkmens, Assyrians, all this diversity. This was my feeling when I met representatives of these minorities. When the first time I had the feeling I'm meeting history. I'm meeting just human history that was sitting in front of me. And he said, let us reintroduce humanities and history in schools. And then, of course, let us work more with young people around this notion of diversity. So I came back and I said, should we do? And 6 months later, I went back to Baghdad. I went to the University of Baghdad, and we launched our first ever social network campaign, Unite for Heritage, with the young Iraqi students. And I think this is one of the most successful campaigns that there are millions of predominantly young people that are each day uploading, sharing experiences, ideas around heritage, culture, diversity, everything that is there. And it is so moving to see these young people in these social network platforms which are sharing and speaking about that. So, and now, of course, Mosul is free, and I know that there was this important conference in Kuwait, pledging, and UNESCO was there, and I think there are plans, of course, to rebuild some of this, to conserve, first of all. So I'm not speaking rebuild, because we don't know what is going to happen there, but just once again to bring back this glory of diversity that Iraq is so famous with.
Yeah, just 5 minutes before break. Short question, short answer, please. You.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Alexa. I'm from Germany. You mentioned the importance of intercultural dialogue, and many institutions and foreign ministries do the same and say intercultural communication, intercultural competence is very important. And there, at the same time, there just seems to be a lack of definition of what that means, as well as an overabundance of what people consider to be intercultural anything. And I just wanted to ask you if you think that this lack, as well as overabundance and confusion of definitions, could lead to a downgrading or lessening of importance in people's minds of this concept and this meaning of intercultural dialogue.
Yeah. Well, I know that people put different meaning in intercultural dialogue. And I think that with the globalization, with everything that is happening, I don't think intercultural dialogue is sufficient to say nowadays what happens in multicultural societies. Let's put it this way. Previously, the understanding of intercultural dialogue was when, and the same, by the way, with the word tolerance, which I don't like so much. I mean, I like the word tolerance, of course, but I don't think it's very appropriate in many of these cases to use only this word, because previously what was? I mean, we had the national borders that protected, there were nation states, there, then there was somebody on the other side of the border or far with different religion, ethnicity and all this, and we dialogue with them and we say we are tolerant. Nowadays it's very different, because as I said, all this is blurred. There are natural movements, migration, natural movements of people. I'm not speaking about refugees, I'm not speaking about humanitarian things. It's just natural. People move, they go, they settle, they work in different places, so they take jobs. And then, of course, there are the refugees. Of course, there is also the, I would say, the humanitarian disasters. There are conflicts. So it becomes much more complex to identify what this meaning of intercultural dialogue and tolerance also means. So I think nowadays within the broader sense of intercultural dialogue, you may put there cultural competencies about other religions or ethnicity or culture. You can put interfaith dialogue, because interfaith dialogue culture also embraces different religions, right? So interfaith dialogue, you can put it also there. In certain environments, it may be inter-ethnic relations, because you may have one religion but still take, for example, South Sudan, where unfortunately there is such a huge conflict, inter-ethnic conflict, albeit they share one religion, different than Central African Republic, for example, with ethnicity similar but different religions. So it is rather, I would say, an umbrella of all different kind of movements and initiatives. So I personally take it as a broad understanding, a broad platform of understanding the other that is different from you. Let's put it this way. And I think that nowadays we need much more of this initiative and understanding, precisely because previously we need not do it. We didn't need this, but now we need it, because some of these people are our neighbors and we need to understand and not to fear them. And I think this is where the problem comes. You don't understand and you fear the unknown. This is the biggest challenge nowadays.